thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. Download the app today.
This is Up for a Chat with your hosts, Cyndi O'Meara and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Cyndi O'Meara.
And I'm Kim Morrison. Oh, what a treat we're in for this week. A beautiful mother, a vet, the author of The Food Solution. She's an organic farmer, a businesswoman, a nature lover, and one hell of an exceptional soul. I want to welcome to Up for a Chat the beautiful Gundi Rhoades. Thank you for coming online with us, sweetheart.
Oh, Kim and Cyndi, hello. I'm so pleased to be here. This will be lovely to just have a chat.
Well, that's why we love the title of it.
It's what we like to do. Kim and I do like having a chat and having a chat with women that are inspiring and have done some incredible things in their lives is what we absolutely love. And we just did a male, but we just interviewed a male. But we love to interview people that are doing incredible things. So before we talk about what you've been doing over the last probably 5 or 10 years, let's go back to why you decided to become a vet.
Oh, wow. That goes back quite a long way. And it's just, like how girls have this dream of becoming a vet. And I was probably only 6 or 7, and we had these. I grew up in a city, so I was not connected to country so much. But we had kittens and wild cats in the garden, and I would rescue birds and kittens, and then it happened that I was good at science at school, and every summer we would go onto my uncle's dairy farm on a little German island, and I just loved it. And I think our ancestral roots of every human on planet are connected to nature, so I felt that always very strongly. So becoming a vet was, connecting animals and science and farming, so it's always what I wanted to do, and I did. And then, of course, a bit of romance, romantic views from James Herriot, like all creatures great and small, chuck that in there. And can't deny that, that was part of this. And maybe sometimes it's good that you don't know what you're letting yourself in for, because vet is not an easy profession to be, but it's a really good one. It's kept me entertained for a long time.
In your book, The Food Solution, you talk about how you kind of woke up, I guess. You started to see not only the animals coming in that were sick, but you noticed the humans were also sick. Do you want to talk about that awakening that you had? And I can't remember, like I read your book the minute I met you, bought your book and I read it. And that was a couple of years ago. So I can't remember the exact timeline of how that happened. So can you talk to us through that?
Yeah, sure. So my first awakening probably came it's probably going back even further, like when I was at school and we talked about the environmental disasters that were happening then, and that was the early 80s. So we had acid rain in Germany, and we talked about catalyzers in cars, and we had just the local ponds that were hypertrophying, like from too much fertilizer. And so I was environmentally aware. When I was at uni, my mom got breast cancer. And so most stories of healing have got a disease, triggering them. And in this case, thank goodness it wasn't mine, but sadly it was my mother's. So that woke me up to nutrition when I was 20, and I went to vet school. So everything that I've done since then had that slight tinge towards whole food and being aware of this food system in it already. And my mum was smart then. She didn't just get breast cancer and then keeled over and let the doctors do with her what they wanted. She actually started thinking for herself, like, why did I get this in the first place? What is behind this? And she came across this Dr. Otto Brucker, a German doctor who did whole food nutrition then. He went back to Weston Price, which is a dentist that did a lot of research all over with indigenous people and looked at, he did a lot of twin research, why is this one degenerate and this other twin is not, so he found a lot of stuff about whole food, that food should not be destroyed and that this is what evolution, has given us to nourish us. And how in a modern world, in like the 70s and 80s, 90s of Germany, it was broken down. So that's when it started. And then when I was a vet in Australia, because I got married and was on a cattle property, and I started to learn about cattle genetics and then about grasses. And then through some personal stuff, I ended up running the farm. And so beef cattle and Angus cattle. And I decided, wow, I really am such an environmentalist. Let's go into organics. And I had that growth. I did not get super far. I did it for a few years and got the accreditation, but I was by then a single mother of 3 children with a vet clinic, so the farm was a good learning experience, but it was also not my prime focus. So then simultaneously is what you just mentioned, Cyndi, where, yes, all these dogs with ear problems and with food allergies and with cancer coming in, that became more and more and more. Cats with kidney disease, cats with caries in their teeth. And like most vets, I never questioned, not really, I was aware for humans, but I wasn't really aware about dog and cat food and the implication and what's in it, because you just get told at uni, this is the best, but, like the commercial, especially in the veterinary industry, like the good, really expensive dog foods. And then, like slowly I found out the truth, what's behind them. And then the people that are attached to my patients. And because I chat, chit chat with them, and the people in your community, I became more and more aware that the people were so sick and at a young age, and the diseases always seemed to be the same. So there were always suddenly the kids with asthma, then the kids with autism. Every family seemed to have one or sometimes 2, or even, one of my clients' families has got 3 children with autism. And this is when it triggered, like, what is going on here? Cancer anyway, and Alzheimer's more and more. My pharma clients with Parkinson's, all these disease pictures. And then the mental health crisis that we are all aware of. It started me thinking, and then it took a long time before it actually occurred to me that all of this has got something to do with how we grow food. And that's when my next wave of research then started. Why is this? Why is there such a breakdown of health, in modern society? And it couldn't just be the whole foods, it could be a big part. But when I started researching, I discovered this next layer, that we can talk about.
I know I do want to talk about that, but I want to take you back just to the 80s. And I'm sorry I'm doing this after I've said all of this, but I find it fascinating that you were environmentally aware in the 80s. And in Germany, it was acid rain. And you said something else that I didn't quite understand, and then too much fertilizer.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that I remember my dad, and now my dad was born in the 20s. I remember my dad saying, every decade there is a disaster, some sort of disaster happening. And he talked about the 70s where there wasn't going to be enough food, but we found a way. And now with the acid rain, I haven't heard that terminology in so long about acid rain. Now it's, we're heating the planet up, or global warming, or global change, or things like that. With your awareness, and I know this is kind of going out a little bit, but I think it's a really important topic to talk about. With your awareness of the environment and what you see living on a farm and living in central New South Wales, do you think what we're hearing all the time is normal climate issues that is cyclical, or do you think that we are creating, I know we're rubbishing the planet, I get that, but are we creating the planet, which is an amazing part of a cosmos and universe? Are we creating an absolute disaster for our planet?
Yeah, of course. I've got no doubt about it. We are, we proliferated so much in the last 100 years. I think in 1953, there were 2 billion of us, which a lot of environmental sins that we would create would be absorbed, just by nature's incredible resilience and healing capacity. 8 billion of us now, with the ever increasing energy hungriness, ever increasing chemical load, ever increasing encroaching into natural habitats. We are a beast, that is not contained at the moment. And I do think we are definitely harming planet Earth in so many different aspects. It's not just the fossil fuel and the carbon that we are pushing out. If it would be only that, maybe we would find a solution faster, and I know that there's a lot of climate skeptics out there, but look, we are pushing 150 million ton of fossil fuel energy, every drop of fossil fuel is just so energy dense and carbon dense. And we are putting this into the atmosphere. And undoubtedly, we have thickened the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is not the only one, water vapor is a huge one. The release of water from soil and from agricultural land, from drying of moors and of wetlands, of destruction of the soil, which my book talks a lot about, the drying out of, the destruction of the organic matter in soil where the humus doesn't hold the water anymore. And all of that water goes up into the atmosphere and again has got a greenhouse effect and has the effect that we get these big floods and droughts and all these weather extremes. That's another part. Methane, we have released methane, and cattle are the least to blame. Their methane has actually been stable through aeons, through centuries and thousands of years. In fact, we have got probably less ruminants now pushing out methane than we used to have before we killed all the bison or all the African antelopes and so forth. So methane from fracking, from Russia and from America, and now sadly from Australia, adds a huge amount of methane to the atmosphere too, and nitrous oxide, so they're the big players in this. And yes, we are in the Anthropocene where we are so many of us and so strong in our dealings, with what we do every day, that, we are having an impact. And the Club of Rome said it, we have, there's 9 planetary boundaries. We have overstepped at least 8 of them. No doubt about it. We have to change our ways.
Yes. And I guess that's what the food solution is all about. And I love that's where you start, is that this is the solution with agriculture, how we feed ourselves, the health of ourselves, local as opposed to otherwise. So let's get into that and how the food solution can help with this, with this environmental disaster that we do see. And I agree with you. I agree that we are absolutely rubbishing this place, and food has a big part to play in it. So yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah, there's a lot of I think most people that I know are aware of what we're doing to planet Earth, and they are grieving, in the northern hemisphere, in Canada and in Norway. I heard about snow grief, that because the snow is gone, there is so much heartache and fear, all over the planet. And the statistics, you get different statistics, of course, but they're running at about 80% or 90% of people that are really acutely aware and very, very worried about it. But most people have no idea of what to do about it, and then we think, oh yeah, fossil fuels, let's just not take the car. Let's go with the bicycle, but that's not always practical. And we're still living in the world that we live in. Some people go for a sustainable lifestyle and become tree changers. But the majority of people, especially if you live in an urban environment, they feel so disempowered and so hopeless all they can do is wait for politicians to see the light and not give billions of dollars to the fossil fuel industry and change their ways, and then get more and more frustrated when that doesn't happen. And I've gone through that. I've gone through my climate grief in the drought, in the 18 and 19 drought. And as a vet, I was sort of right in the middle of it, because I've sold my farm, recently, but then I still had my farm. I had my garden on the farm where I planted trees and flowers and roses, and everything was dead. It just looked like a horror scene. Every day we would have the smoke, and it would be yellow, and then we would have dust storms and hot winds in about this time of year, like late August, early September, where it was like 30 degrees and a hot, whirlwindy dust storms, connected and combined with fires all around us. It was just horrendous. And then the koalas being brought into my clinic, because they eat gum leaves, and the gum trees had shut down. That's why they can survive droughts, but they also died. Many, many trees in this district died. But so the koalas eating gum leaves didn't get enough water out of them, went into kidney failure because of dehydration. And, we couldn't save them. They were just too far gone. So there was so much grief, and I honestly, I just cried. I could not believe it. I would wake up in the morning and think, have we really done this to planet Earth? I kept thinking there was some hope, and no, there isn't any. So from that point of hopelessness that I think I share nowadays with most of the population, I wrote this book, and then suddenly the drought was over and it started raining. And then the frogs came back, and I was sitting right where I'm sitting now, and down below my house is a creek, and I could suddenly hear the frogs. It was January in 2020, February maybe, just in that 2-week window between the drought and coronavirus, the 2 weeks where we thought, oh, all is well. And so I saw nature revive around me, and suddenly there are cattle again in the paddocks, that are fat and healthy. And, the farmers saw good times again. So just to have that direct experience of nature healing what I thought was lost, just gave me so much hope, and as a veterinarian anyway, I see healing happen every day. Like a dog with a broken leg, I just put it in its place and it'll heal. The most horrendous injuries, that the bodies heal again, so that's where the hope is. So then writing this book simultaneously, and diving into soil and the destruction of nature through agrochemicals, which we can talk about in a minute, because I see so much damage being done there. But thinking, wow, we can change that by the choice of what we buy. The story of, like the two wolves, which one do you feed, the one that kills or the good one, the two beings in us. We can actually feed the world, we can support the system that supports Earth rather than contributing the system that kills Earth. So that's why the food solution. Now, so by the choice of what you buy, if you buy, and let's just put the term organic here. I know it's a bit loaded, but let's put for unpoisoned, whole, traditionally grown on healthy soils without chemical sprays, food, as just place organic in there. Yeah. So if we eat organic food, you are supporting the system that grows food on healthy soil in healthy ecosystems. So if you buy an organic egg, that egg was from a chicken that was outside. So the nutritional value of that egg in terms of vitamin D or calcium is much higher because the chicken was happy. The chicken is happy, so you support a happy chicken industry rather than, in a very horrible, mass production of chicken. The grain that chicken was fed was grown on a paddock where there is no Roundup, there is no 2,4-D, there is no paraquat, there are no insecticides. So the soil is alive. The soil is full of humus. The soil can hold water. the soil can sequester carbon. So the soil is not fertilized with nitrous oxide fertilizer. So all of these big ones, that I mentioned before, the big culprits of climate change, tick, 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 you have already made with that egg, supporting that industry, a positive impact. You also didn't get an egg that was produced by a chicken that was eating grain that was grown on a huge monoculture out west somewhere, by massive fossil fuel intensive agriculture where all these agrochemicals are put on the soil, and the farmers are sick and their children are sick often, and the wives can't wait to get out of there, to go to the coast where it's not so toxic, and the insecticides are sprayed with a dust cropper aeroplane, where no insect survives anymore, and the runoff goes down the river, and then the rivers run into the ocean and create dead zones, so the impact, there's a lot to what I just said, but the point is that the impact of supporting a good way of growing food has got all these literally downstream also, consequences of goodness. And just by you buying that egg, you can actually clap yourself on the shoulder, because you supported all of these things down the road. And of course, it doesn't stop even there, because to make, for example, nitrogen fertilizer, it is done in big factories, massively energy intensive. Then the fertilizer has to be transported. There goes your fossil fuels again. The chemicals that are produced to produce toxic, chemically treated grain, are the most toxic on the planet. So the impact that you have alone by eating organic is just so much bigger than most people are aware of. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Could we talk about, there's something that I really learned from you, and I want to talk about that after we talked about how it's destroyed, and that's the ecology of the soil. And what you've taught me has been mind-blowing for myself. But let's talk about that when we've talked about these chemicals that you mentioned. I think you mentioned glyphosate, parquet, nitrous oxide. Did you say atrazine? Did you say
atrazine is part of that? Yeah.
So what is, and you also mentioned that without it, with these chemicals, we have less humus, less water, less carbon, less ecology. Which of those, and I know this is asking a ridiculous question because they all have their way of destroying, the planet's soils, and getting into our food and destroying human health and animal health, which would you say has been the most aggressively used and the most aggressive on our soils and our health?
Yeah, I don't think any one of them are good. So the two most used ones are Roundup, which is a chemical called glyphosate, made by Monsanto. And the other one that's probably just as big is 2,4-D, and dicamba is another form of 2,4-D. Quickly talking about 2,4-D. 2,4-D is part of Agent Orange, which most people remember from Vietnam War, where massive parts of Vietnam were defoliated with, so that the trees dropped all their leaves, so that the American helicopters could see the people on the Viet Cong people on the ground. And I don't know if you've ever seen the consequences of this Agent Orange on the population of Vietnam, where there's birth defects and cancer and leukemias, it's just dreadful. So that's 2,4-D, and people don't realize that is still used nearly as much as Roundup, on soils. And it's cancerogenic, and it causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it is implicated in Parkinson's disease. So it's not very nice, My deeper research that I did was into Roundup, into glyphosate. And that is now, I think, the most common one. Everybody around here sprays Roundup. And it's evil in disguise. And the company and the common perception of Roundup is, it's fine, you can drink it. Because it destroys a pathway that is called the shikimate pathway. And we don't have that as mammals, as humans. But bacteria have got it, and fungi have got it, algae and plants. So it is mainly used as a herbicide to kill plants. But so as it was meant to be not harmful because it doesn't directly harm us, because we don't have the pathway, they've overlooked all these other things that Roundup actually does. And so the main ones, number one, it kills bacteria, fungi, as well as plants, because bacteria have got the pathway, the shikimate pathway, and so do fungi and algae. So farming has had about 100 years of chemical farming, where the good old Liebig, German, I think, German biologist or chemist, he discovered that the soil has got all these different components, magnesium, calcium, iron, blah, blah, blah. And if one of them is missing, the plant can't grow. So this is what traditional agriculture in the last 100 years has been like. Let's put the chemistry back into the soil. If there's magnesium missing, let's put magnesium in. If there is calcium missing, let's put lime on. And forgetting and not knowing actually that soil has got a biology attached to it, which is very interesting because, Cyndi, as you know, in human nutrition and in human medicine, we completely ignored the gut microbiome, didn't even know about it. As veterinarians, we knew because we are dealing with ruminants and everything in the ruminant is going through bacterial pathways, but we ignored that even us as non-ruminants have got a colon, that is full of bacteria and what they do. So there was a real paradigm shift in medicine now that we are discovering, my goodness, everything has got to do with bacteria. And I think that's where Roundup was not recognized as how evil it is, because by killing that pathway, it kills these bacteria. And the bacteria are not only in us, so when you eat bread, let's say, that is conventionally grown, and often nowadays wheat is harvested after an application with Roundup. So the farmer will go and spray the crop dead so that it dries out evenly, and then they harvest it. So the wheat in your daily bread that you're eating has got Roundup in it, and quite a bit. And it even gets less, more toxic the less you have, so it's very, dangerous in that way too. But so what does happen then, if you eat this Roundup, which is classed as an antibiotic because it kills the shikimate pathway, it goes into your gut and kills your gut microbiome. So then, we could spend 2 hours talking about the gut microbiome. For now, just remember that non-organic food will have Roundup in it, which will harm your gut microbiome. And of course, in the soil, it harms the soil microbiome, of which we were not aware of until a few, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when beautiful people like Dr. Elaine Ingham, of the Soil Food Web, started to do their research. So what happens when the bacteria are dead in the soil? And this is where the second point comes in, where Roundup is really evil. It is a chelator, chelator. It's a chelator of plus ions. So iron, magnesium, calcium, manganese, boron. Lots of these minerals are then chemically chelated, bound, hooked, it's translated as hooked, in the ground by Roundup. So the bacteria that would normally be there in healthy soil and come and make the minerals are in the soil, but they got to get somewhere into the food chain. Yeah. For you to eat spinach with lots of magnesium in it, the magnesium has to come from somewhere, and it has to come from the soil. Where else should it come from? So it's got to come from the soil. By the way, there goes hydroponics. If you're eating hydroponic food, you will not have the richness of minerals. You eat pretty nutrient empty food. It'll look like a tomato, but it has got nothing in it. And this is the reason why, because in the soil, We have all these minerals that nature has provided, but they've got to get into the plant. How do they get there? They have to be sucked up by the roots. How are they made available to the roots? Is actually by the bacteria and the fungi. So they will go and they will make those minerals available, and then they can go into the plant. So not only did we kill the microbes with Roundup as an antibiotic, we also took the bacteria away that would make these minerals available and put them into, help them be absorbed by the food. So that's the second evil thing. So you then enter nutrient deficiencies, and Cyndi, you as a nutritionist will know how far-reaching the consequences of not having the minerals in our diet, the magnesiums that relax your blood vessels and your bladder, and the calciums or the manganese, the borons, the seleniums, all of these are now deficient in the food that we're eating, with health consequences that are quite dramatic. The next thing where Roundup is really evil is that, again, it kills the microbes, and the microbes, the bacteria and the fungi, they are actually the producers of a lot of nutrients. And that has been completely overlooked in most aspects when we talk about food and nutrition and soil. So when you read up in a book, and it was really interesting when I wrote my book and I did go and did some research, like, where do the B vitamins come from? And you read they come from the food that you eat. And then you read, can plants that you eat, your vegetables or your fruit, can they make B vitamins? And in most cases, it turned out, no, they can't. Yeah. So if your B vitamins that you would get, let's say, from an apple or from some spinach, or even from meat, because animals can't make them either. So then it's, where do they come from? And then, research. And I went through every B vitamin, and always, it went back to bacteria make them. You know how bacteria make their little engines, little living, beautiful machines of making stuff, so we make wine, we make beer, we ferment cabbage and make sauerkraut, we make kimchi. And it turns out that these things are so healthy because they have got the bacteria in it, and they make our B vitamins. So the implications of that, I don't think anybody thought about. Maybe they did, and if they did, then they really need to be, taken responsible for this, because if the bacteria in the soil are the only things that make these nutrients, the B vitamins, for us, then our, the food chain, if we kill the microbes and they're not made anymore, is so deficient in B vitamins alone. And when you read up about B vitamin deficiencies, then a lot of health symptoms will make sense. Like one, for example, is vitamin B1. So made in the soil by the bacteria, then put into the grain, and then you should have that in the grain, and then you eat that as bread. To make matters worse is we take the germ of the wheat when we make bread out of in the production process of making flour. So even the little bit of vitamin B1 that might have still been there is then chucked out in the process, and you get flour that has got nothing in it. And we should have 5 milligrams of vitamin B1 per day. And we have 1, I think, on average, or 0.9. And so then the WHO, the World Health Organization, knows this, and they say every bread that we produce must have some thiamine, some B1, look on the packet, supplement to it to counteract the deficiency. So this is what's happening, like we destroy the soil, the B vitamins are not made anymore, and you go to the shop and buy a Barocca. The companies are the same, that make that stuff on that side and that destroy it on that side. So are you still with me?
I am still with you. And
Yep.
and that's what I learned from you, is that it's not the plants making the B vitamins. And I wasn't sure whether they make even the phytonutrients or the bioflavonoids, or is it the beautiful bacteria? Are they making it all and then taken in by the plants?
Yeah. So I went and research the amino acids. So amino acids, for the listeners that are not biologists, the amino acids there's about 20 of them. And those 20 have got, they are the building blocks of proteins. So you can say that every amino acid, which is a little conglomerate of a bit of carbon, bit of nitrogen, the occasional sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen, that's all, but in different sort of formations of little chains, small chains. And let's call them, they're the words, of a sentence. And let's call them the letters, letters of a word. And then the amino acids are put together in certain sequences to make proteins. And those proteins are your muscle tissue or your skin or your cell membranes, your hormones, your enzymes. And so the amino acids are in a certain sequence, and that's a blueprint from your DNA. So it's like your skin is coded in the DNA. The blueprint is translated into, this sequence of amino acids. And we can, as people, we can make 12 of the 20, but we can't make the other 8. A cat can't make 10 and a dog can't make 9, something like that. So these are the so-called essential amino acids. You have to take them in with food. So then when we go with my favorite one, tryptophan, which is one of them, and most people know the word tryptophan now because a lot of supplements have got tryptophan in them. So where is tryptophan made? So I read, you eat it with turkey, that's always a good one. Turkey is high in tryptophan, or beef is good for tryptophan too. So great, we eat the beef. And then you read mammals, and cows and us are mammals, can't make tryptophan. And you think, I thought they made it because I eat meat. No, wrong. They don't make it. Then maybe the plants make it. And then you find out the plants probably don't make it either. And then it turns out that the microbiome in the soil makes it. So the microbiome, the bacteria in the soil produce, because the bacteria are just everything, they are just everything. And yet we disinfected our soils, we disinfect our homes, we disinfect our internal organs, we just disinfect, and we are killing the microbes that are actually building the building blocks of our life. So when you don't have the little bacteria in the soil making those 8 essential amino acids anymore, suddenly you have got the letters in your alphabet missing. And so let's say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, blah, 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 and you take 8 out of those 32 letters that we have, you take 8 out and your language won't make sense anymore. This is where such a danger is, So if we lack in tryptophan because the bacteria were killed that would make it, then it's not in the plant, then it's not in the turkey or the cow and the beef that we're eating. It's not in us. You're deficient in tryptophan. What's the consequence of that? And let's go into our gut, go down our stomach and into our small intestine and into our large intestine. So if you are lucky enough to eat tryptophan, then that has to be made into 5-HT, which is then made into serotonin. And serotonin is a substance that most people are aware of. So serotonin then goes from your gut. It's produced in your gut, like 80, 90, maybe even 100% of the serotonin is made in your gut. Then it goes blum, blum, blum into your brain. And we all know it makes you happy. So the medical profession now has got to deal with a wave of depressed people. And I wonder, does this have something to do with each other? And so the doctors, the medical profession, will then give most patients a serotonin uptake inhibitor, an SUI. So they prevent that, they just leave serotonin in and around your brain and the bloodstream a little bit longer before it's stored away. So why do we have such a need for these serotonin uptake inhibitors, antidepressant medication? Could it be that we have destroyed all of our food chain so much, that now we don't have tryptophan? But what I didn't mention is in your gut, you need to go from tryptophan to serotonin. Guess what? Guess who's doing that? It's not your body. It's bacteria. right?
Mm.
So they are so damn important, like without them, nothing functions, so that is your gut microbiome. So surely, eating bread or other products, that are pasta and so forth, cakes that have got Roundup in them, which it will, if you don't eat organic, and your gut microbiome suffers, your serotonin will be low. And not only is tryptophan the building block for serotonin, it's also for melatonin, which makes you sleep. And it's also for vitamin B3. So there you again have a bacteria making your B vitamin, this time in your gut. Yeah, but it's always bacteria that make this stuff, make the amino acids. I think they do make, as far as my research went, the polyphenols as well, the alkaloids, all bacterial fermentation products. And when you nowadays Google, where does vitamin B12 come from, or where does vitamin B1 comes from, you actually get put into, it comes from this and this company in China, which is so funny in a way, because it was all what nature provided us. But because we have destroyed life at the most fundamental level, of the microbiome in the soil where everything comes from, that now we have this supplement industry, that will, what we have destroyed there will give us in a bottle there. And I want everybody to be aware that when you buy supplements from, even from reputable people, they're all bacterial fermentation products made in a factory in whatever, China, India. I think they're the big players, wherever they are made. And often the bacteria that are made to produce your B1 or B3 or your tryptophan are genetically modified to do so. So be aware, I wonder if our bodies really can cope with that. And synthetic vitamins are never as good as the real ones, But, to make all of this story even more interesting is then I heard a few podcasts and did some research about how bacteria are actually not just in the soil, but where they go, sometimes they even drop their cell membrane and then they go up and down the plant. And that's quite common, and it's only been known for a few years, which is incredible, So fungi can do the same. So where let's say we take a leaf of a plant and we find, as a biochemist, you find this pathway, or the plant makes it, I would not be surprised. And this is hypothetical, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is the bacteria in the plant, even working their magic in the plant, and when you look at mitochondria, they are ancient bacteria. When you look at chlorophyll, ancient bacteria, so it's not surprising in a way, because bacteria were the first life form on Earth. But what we have not understood really as humans, because our brain is only that little, and we know a lot, but not everything. And we've just not understood the importance of the bacteria. Now we know they're on the skin, they're in our eyes, they are in our breasts, preventing, even helping us not to get breast cancer. They are for sure in our gut. And, what the microbiome in the gut is doing is just amazing. And so it is in the soil and in everywhere. Nothing lives without bacteria. So if we would be sterile and we don't have bacteria in us or on us, you are susceptible to all these diseases. So by swallowing Roundup, and antibiotics anyway, antifungals anyway, disinfectants, chlorinated water and so forth, we are really destroying our source of life. And then we are sterilizing the soil with the chemicals that we put on. And the fertilizers, urea that we put on kills the microbiome of the soil. So the NPK fertilizer kills the microbiome of the soil, and so forth, so we have really destroyed the ecosystems as well. We are laden everything with agrochemicals, and then we are destroying the essential building blocks of life. Did you get that?
I got it. I got it all. I have a few comments to make. Number one, you can't wash this stuff off.
No.
It is it is just, and people say that to me, but can't I wash it off? And I go, no, because of what you've just said. I don't explain it as brilliantly as you do, but you just can't wash this stuff off. And secondly, the synthetic biology that you were talking about, where they're genetically modifying these bacteria to make our supplements, our medications, our food additives, our flavors, they're making they know this. They like human or science actually knows this, that these microbes do everything for us. And so, but what they're doing is, rather than letting them do their job, they are manipulating and controlling them, like they seem to be doing to us, but manipulating and controlling them to produce exactly what they want. And as you said, we don't know what that B12 or that flavor or that citric acid or that xanthan gum that is made by these genetically modified molds and fungi and bacteria and viruses. They're even doing it to the viruses to make, I forget what they do it to the virus to make something to do with meat. Maybe a flavor of meat. I can't remember exactly. But I just, that's what blew my mind, is when you said that about the bacteria did everything in the soil for those plants. I realized that science has known this a long time, because they've been doing synthetic biology since insulin was made with genetically modified microbes to help, people that needed insulin. So they've known that these bacteria are whizzes, but we keep destroying them. It feels frustrating, and I guess, rather than to be frustrated, your food solution and what your book says gives us what we should be doing, and which you've actually already talked about. But now that we've looked at the problem, let's look at your solution to what we need to do as individuals to be all powerful, and then collectively to be mighty powerful. So let's talk about what we should be doing now with not only us, our plants, but our animals as well.
Yeah, I called it the food solution because so many problems on planet Earth, food miles, transport, the chemical industry, the destruction of the oceans and the rivers and the fish death and being vulnerable. We haven't talked about local yet, being vulnerable to the corona pandemic showed this. You stop the trucks, and little towns like mine that are just nearly 100%. I live in the middle of the country, 16,000 people live here, and there is not anybody that grows vegetables. Like we have an abattoir, but the meat goes to Korea. So stop the trucks, and we have a problem there. The agri-chemical pharmaceutical industries are now the biggest in the world, and they are manipulating our seeds, the seed stock that we have. They're creating monocultures. The health of people is at a one-time low. And all of these problems, including climate change, are connected to the food system. Agriculture is responsible for 40% of emissions. And all of that, bingo, solved by talking about solutions. Buy local, if you can, buy organic, not sprayed on healthy soil, grown in soil. Problem solved. It nearly sounds too easy. Cattle, I have to talk about cattle, because meat is so vilified. And yet, we might be a different podcast, actually, because we could talk about that for an hour, about the beauty of cattle in grasslands, but in a nutshell, if you eat, let's say, beef that was grown on a regenerative farm with regenerative principles, they actually are the fastest method of putting carbon back into the ground, the fastest method of increasing humus and holding water in the landscape, the fastest method of recreating small water cycles, so they do all of this good thing, and then, we can eat them, sadly, but we've got to eat something, at the other end. So the healing potentially, if we would just heal agriculture, would actually sort so many problems out that we have, including, the concentration of wealth, with a few, Yeah, this is a huge problem, that a few individuals or a few families or whoever, like has got all the money. Keep it local, distribute it to your local people, buy your food locally. Somewhere where you can ride with your bicycle and you get healthier along the way, and your health, so the medical industry is such a big industry, and the destruction through drugs, that we're taking, statins and anti-blood pressure or anti-cancer, like all drugs that, I just put it out there boldly now, we would not need if we would have not destroyed our health in the first place through eating non-alive food. All of that would not be needed. So the suffering for ecosystems, animals, the people that eat, the dramas that I see coming through my clinic, the autistic children, like all of that could be just bypassed, because let's face it, we are not going to win against Monsanto and Bayer. They are so powerful that you cannot beat them, but we can bypass them. It just takes a lot of us to do this, and the first step to doing that and taking the power back for our health and for the health of our planet, is to be aware of these things. And this is where I wanted to show this in my book. It's like you don't even know what's happening. Most people, I would like to think, don't even know that eating white bread has got all these detrimental consequences to Mother Earth, because you just don't see. You might have heard it, but you don't really know how your food is grown and what's happening to it. Like you might be slightly aware, but the depth of the destruction, I don't think most people are aware of. So know that first, and then know, by supporting that, by buying this white loaf of bread, not only do I do myself so much harm, by creating diabetes and cancer, but also I'm creating harm for the environment. So with me doing, buying organic, regenerative, local, unpoisoned, untoxic, healthy, nutritious food, I actually solve the planet's problems, to such a large degree that you don't even know your impact that you're having, but like, if you do know, then every time you buy that egg or you buy that broccoli or you buy that organic flour, that or organic grain or rice, be sure that your positive impact is absolutely priceless.
Gundi, can I please ask you, we've been listening to you now, and your heart and knowledge and soul in this is profound. I want to bring it back to the mum, the busy mum that's working her butt off, wanting to feed her kids and do the right thing, and the dad that's working his butt off to make sure the money's there to buy the food each week. People may not really understand the whole science and chemistry in behind this, but this is a philosophy you're talking about. We can bring it back to a philosophy, and one of them that Cyndi's always talked about is eating slow, seasonal, local, organic, and whole. Just if we could just live by that one philosophy where we bring it back to nature, knowing where our foods come from, by just, for instance, going to our local markets or buying locally. I hear that. The mum or the everyday person may not fully understand or comprehend that whilst you can do that, it's also the little choices like what paper we buy, which shops and supermarkets we choose to buy from. It's having a coffee and a piece of cake that's made with that white flour. So we may not buy the white bread, but we may not know what's been made when we sit in a coffee shop. It's understanding the philosophy behind the coffee and the cafe owners. Like, this is massive. But if you could simplify it, which is what you've just done, which is just bringing it back and being aware of where we spend our money, what do you think would be the number one thing you could really help the everyday busy woman and mum who may have just got quite overwhelmed hearing all of that, because they're not thinking about the shikimate pathway. They're thinking about putting food on their table and then the kids actually liking the food. What can we do to bring this back into the home Is it a case of just growing some beautiful herbs and actually learning like we did at school, where I used to get such a kick out of watching our beans? We'd plant them and then we'd see it germinate and we'd see it like the wonderment of where our food came from. How do we ignite that spirit in the home again?
Such a good question, Kim. Like, how do we do that? I think just education, schools, I hope, the Stephanie Alexander Gardens, and being the examples, I think too, like being like you two, so full of life, like you're sparkling bright, and Cyndi, we are sort of like one age, roughly, like, well, we still got so much life in us. So I think we are examples for that. Of course, small scale, but to create, somebody said to me, fighting against systems is really exhausting. Spending too much time thinking about shikimate pathways and the destruction, is really exhausting too. And it's actually not exciting. It's draining. And it's like, oh, how do I do this? How can I be a mother? And life is too exhausting anyway. How can I cope? Well, all you have to do is, like choose this food, the local, the wholesome. Doesn't have to be even having the organic label, just grown there. Try to get as much as you can, and all the rest will sort itself out. So this is all you have to do. This is not really that exhausting. Money comes always into it, that organic food should be cheaper because it's healthy, but it is not, because we have got a sickness economy nearly. And so money is a huge problem, and food prices have risen, but do what you can. And then be inspired by just the hope, especially as a mother. You want your children to have a future. And what always helped me whenever I was like tight with money and I would go to the supermarket and think, oh, let's just take the other eggs. And I would have my friend's child that died of a brain tumor in the back of my head, other children that I know that have got leukemia. And I thought, you know what? Every penny that I have, I will spend on the food that I'm eating. Like you can save on other things. You save on a holiday, save on that new sofa that you might want to buy, save on that cup of coffee, but stick with organic food, because of the most important. So I think a really clear message is keep your children safe. Mothers of babies have got it. They will buy organic baby food, because
yes, but can I just interrupt you there? Because I know a lot of very intelligent mums. They've got high education. Some of them are academic, and yet they still buy white bread. They still put food flavorings or buy foods with usually bars or things like that. And I'm not knocking it. I'm just curious as to, they're vigilant, and they were vigilant when their babies were first born. Why does it change? And the second part to that question, you were talking earlier about, and Cyndi was as well, just about how science now creates these microbes in a laboratory, or they create these medicines in a laboratory to heal from these diseases that we've now created by destroying the food in the first place. This whole thing seems so diabolical, but there seems to be a thread throughout the whole thing. There's a lot of money to be made in patenting a drug or a microbe or a laboratory something. Why? Is it greed? Is it the fact that scientists have become so egotistical, they want to be the people that have created this? Is it because we're so goddamn lazy that we now have glyphosate to get rid of the weeds, to make the harvest easier, because we can't be bothered? Where have we gone wrong?
Oh, if I would know that answer, Kim, it's big. Baffles me, like people can come in with cancer or diabetes, and you offer them help or a solution, which is probably not my place anyway, but I have these conversations, and 9 out of 10 people will not change. They will rather die. So it's a psychological phenomenon. Why do we as mankind just go down that cliff? We know, and we do not change, and so fear of change, I think the psychologists are the people to ask, the knowing doing gap, it's called, like, even if why don't you, this will make you sick and sad, but you still do it, so habits, ivory towers of science, that we just took everything apart. We didn't put it back together. We lost the overview of things. We are so science hungry nowadays that nothing without data, I get attacked, where's your data? Like, you got to realize data is there where people are looking for a monetary reason nowadays, so it's such a multifaceted problem. Why this is the big money interests? Who would be really interested in having a healthy population? Like, it's all wrong. It's all back to front. And can we change it? I don't know. One person at a time.
And that's the sad thing, I think, Gundi. We're three women that I think we've been evangelists for good health for a long time. We're mothers. We care for our community. We care for our friends. And like, it makes me want to cry. It really does, because I don't think that it's going to come from the top down. No. It has to come from people like you, like Kim, like me, like everybody else that I see out there, trying to make people aware of what agriculture has done and what it is doing. And it's raping and pillaging the land. And
but Cyndi, no one asks that question. No. Like those intellectual women I'm talking about that have young children, they don't talk about agriculture, the benefits of soil. They love play and they love their children being outside, and they understand the importance of being outside and eating a healthy diet. But their definition of a healthy diet includes white flour and white sugar. So I'm just not sure how that gap is ever going to be met unless, Gundi alluded to it, when someone is presented with a life-threatening illness. But even you've said it, 1 out of 10 people will only be the 1 out of 10 that changes, even when faced with a life-threatening illness.
So I guess we can't save the world; we can only save ourselves. And that's what it is in the end. We can only save ourselves, and then by example, we may be able to influence our family and friends, and with their love and support, a community, a country, and a planet. So I guess that's where it gets down to. But I feel, Gundi and Kim, I feel all powerful when I choose my food right. I actually do. And it's because I am choosing not to play in the sandbox of the people that, like you've just explained, that are destroying our planet.
But they don't even realize they are. I've got so many people around me that they're such big environmentalists. They think that climate change is the biggest thing on the planet and we should be fighting for it and all of that. And then they go and eat a croissant made from white flour and a coffee with milk that's pasteurized and homogenized, and then they have a teaspoon of white sugar in it. Like there's a disconnect, Gundi and Cyndi. There's a disconnect of understanding that those two things actually relate.
And, this is why I felt compelled in writing this book, because, and I would love it to be a bestseller, and everybody to read this, and I don't know if it ever will, but to just show this and to make people that are really well-meaning understand this, because I'm convinced people do not know, as you say, they just have no idea that the white bread is the culprit and the cow is not. It's topsy-turvy, so if we would have more vegetarian food, more genetically modified soy, let's face it, 9 out of 10 times is genetically modified. Why is it genetically modified? So that it can be oversprayed with Roundup. Does anybody know this? No, they don't. And I did not know this either, not really, before I started, and I still don't really know, before I started to do, to look closer into this. Can I just add, though, that I am so aware of not being farmer bashing, and agriculture bashing. I live in this community and I know those people, and I'm pretty convinced that most people are good. Let's just assume most people are good, and that most people do want to do well, for their community and their families and for themselves. And that there is a lot that is not known, about the harmful effects of these chemicals. And then they are so bound in their financial paradigms. They've got debt, they've got the farm equipment, they've got kids at boarding school, and the knowledge of how to grow food without chemicals has been lost. And now it's a vicious cycle because the soils are dead. The crops are less resilient. They need more chemicals to prop them up artificially. And so it continues. And a lot of the farmers, even if they wanted to, they can't get out of that system. So that's a bigger political or societal question. Like, how do we help these farmers change? And what I did running cattle is easy. Like you put up a few more fences, you push them around a bit faster, and the problem is solved. That's why I'm such a big advocate for let's not blame the cows, because it's doable. They don't die from a hailstorm or from a thunderstorm. They go and drink by themselves. They eat by themselves. It's much easier to grow cattle than it is to grow a crop of tomatoes, which can get frosted, dried out, eaten by insects, So while we are trying to figure out how to grow crops without chemicals, there is a long way to go before we reconnect to that knowledge, and again, the solution for that will be in the soil growing bacteria, which I'm doing at home a bit. I've started dabbling with EM, beneficial microbes, and so that'll all go down there. But as you say, the big discrepancy is the disconnectedness of knowing where the food comes from, urban societies. And yeah, I absolutely agree. As people, but if people would know, if they would read my book and see, oh, this is actually the consequence of me eating white bread, because who would think that white bread is killing planet Earth?
Well, I must admit, your book was riveting. I got through it very, very quickly. So I will make sure on the show notes we put where your book, or the name of your book, exactly the name of it, where it's The Food Solution: Eating for Today to Save Tomorrow. So we'll put that on there. Is there any other way that they can contact you if they want to? Do you have any socials or a website?
I've been building it for years. I'm such a social media phobic person. To me, it is just another part of the system, where I cringingly occasionally write a Facebook post. I am on Facebook. You can text me on or Facebook me on Gundi Rhoades. I'm in Inverell. Cyndi will have my details. Welcome to ring me or to email me. And yeah, my social media posts are so few, and I'm still very busy. I'm still a full-time veterinarian. Like running a busy clinic. So social media is my really bad side.
Well, you know about what? Everyone's just going to have to be old-fashioned and buy the book and read it, because that's the way we always used to do it back in the days before social media. So I implore anybody who's listening to this who wants to know a little bit more, and it is really well done. And I love your stories, about the animals and the humans. It's one of those books that I couldn't put down. So on behalf of Kim and I'd like to thank you for spending this wonderful hour with us and teaching the scientists that are listening a little bit more, and the professionals, as well as Kim, as she always does, brings it back to many of our listeners who are the mothers. And hopefully we will get 1, 2, 3 people who now choose to be a little bit more discretionary about the food that they're purchasing. Thank you, Gundi.
Thank you, Gundi. You're amazing. And I too wanted to be a vet, except when I couldn't save my dog, I realized I wasn't going to handle seeing animals die. So I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. But I love the fact that you do, and you're incredible. And we do both truly love your book and all the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. The one message is, there's hope, and the biggest hope is by choosing the food that you're eating. Your impact is, and it's empowerment, isn't it, to take it back into your own hands. And and when we realize that, mothers, I think a lot of change will come from women.
Yeah, the world needs it.
Yeah.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Time for a quick break on Up for a Chat to share our favourite products.
My documentary, What's with Wheat, talks about a lot of things that Gundi Rhoades has talked about with glyphosate. So it is a 2016 documentary, but it is still very current and the information is very important. And you learn about the shikimate pathway. I even show you a photo of the shikimate pathway or a video of it. And there are some wonderful researchers and wonderful people that I've interviewed, such as Vandana Shiva, Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, Stephanie Seneff, and so on. It's very worth watching. So just go to www.whatswithwheat.com.
Now, I may not have a science degree, but I certainly know that what I choose to put into and onto my body has significant impact on our environment and our planet. This is why I'm so passionate about 28 being an organic company. Our farmers choose to grow their beautiful plants biodynamically. They're harvested with grace and they're harvested with love. And that is why I have the company 28 and why I'm so passionate about buying not just any oils, but using oils that have a high vibrational frequency. You could call that love and care. So you can head on over to 28.com, the word 20, the number 8.com, to know that you can buy oils that are grown with love and care biodynamically and without any of those chemicals that harm us, the planet, our environment, and our beautiful animals. Take care.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.